Peter. Disclaimer, not a doctor. Um, just I've been a strength and conditioning coach for almost 15 years now. I am a licensed massage therapist in the state of Ohio. I have an infatuation with human motor learning and development and just movement in general, not just from a physical performance standpoint, but if you look at from a learning and mental health standpoint, how integral movement is to just our complete well-being. I've studied a lot before my kid was born on the importance of movement and why he needs it. Even my mom's like, "Oh, I can't believe he's doing so well and moving so much." And literally, I don't do anything. I just put him on the ground and let him go. Um, I'm just fascinated by this movement, but we live in a society where lack of movement is one of the I think, top 3 or 4 causes of chronic metabolic disease. I think it's drinking, smoking, nutrition, and inactivity. Um, I believe that movement is the one thing we can control. I know this isn't new for some of you hearing me talk about this, but I'm just trying to preface this is kind of how I got to where my thought process is for today on injury. I've had broken tons of bones, torn tons of things. I've experienced injury. I just ran a 10K last week. Like, was super nervous about it because the last time I ran, I tore my meniscus. So I kind of just was really nervous running an even further distance than I had when I got injured. But it's part of the game. It's part of being active. It's part of what we do. Um, and I always have like Matt in the back of my head with his knee surgeries and him doing what he's doing, just kind of as that motivation. So the first question I always wonder, right, is why do we get injured? Right? It's the tissue that gets injured isn't strong enough to withstand the force placed upon it. Right? So our bones break. Bones can actually move. They're actually pliable, but when we apply too much force, they snap. It's the same with any soft tissue injury, um, and things like that. But we have acute injuries and we have chronic. Chronic's the ones that kind of stick around for a while. Um, and when we look at pain, pain is a very complex topic. It's a very complex subject. Physical pain. It's not as cut and dry as like I have pain in my ankle, so there's damage. So yeah, I can't move it. Pain is your body's way of communicating with you that it doesn't feel safe in what it's about to do. Now, yes, there may be tissue damage, there may be injury. I'm not saying there won't, but when we see things with like chronic injury or issues that keep reoccurring, pain is a safety mechanism to prevent you from going into ranges of motion that it doesn't feel safe going into. I also feel that's why people say their hips are tight. Hips get tight, muscles get tight. I believe because their body doesn't feel safe nor strong in the positions you're asking it to be in. Right. So if someone comes in with tight hips and they're like, my hips are so tight, you ask them, like, well, when's the last time you actually moved your hips through their ranges of motion? Um, so when we look at injury, it is complex because it's traumatic. It doesn't matter how it happens, right? But the body's built to repair itself. That's part of why inflammation is important. It actually casts. So we'll talk about a sprained ankle. When it swells, it actually happens for a reason. It's to form a natural cast around the joints, so to prevent you from moving it, so the body can repair itself. But what do we do is we put ice on it, we compress it to try and get the swelling to go down. Well, we want swelling until, yes, it can get to a point where it can be dangerous, but swelling is just a sign of your body doing its job. So when I'm talking about injury today is one, I want to talk about mindset. We kind of talked about it last week, but having that first question is we have to have some better conversations with our mind and our body around injury, right? A lot of times we have injuries and we start to lose trust between our mind and body. We don't trust our body to go into ranges of motion. We don't trust our body to do the things that it used to. And then we avoid those things for fear that we'll get injured again. So if we know that tissues get injured because they're not strong enough to be in the positions that we're asking them to be, that is kind of our starting point for rehabilitation, right? We have to, that's essentially what rehab should be, is to help make, so like again with an ankle, we have to make the structure strong again so it can withstand force that we're asking to be put upon it. But most of the rehab protocols, that this isn't to knock physical therapy, this is more of a knock on the insurance company, and which pigeonholes and kind of puts physical therapists in this, they can't do what they really need to do. Most insurance only allows patients to get to about 80% better to where they were prior to the injury. So you're 80% better to where you were before you got injured. Now, how they gauge that is just kind of dictated by insurance. You have to meet certain check boxes and ranges and strength and things of the sorts, which is why physical therapists need to befriend strength and conditioning coaches so they can work together as you kind of get bridging that gap from the medical to performance. But they don't. You go to physical therapy, they give you the white sheet of paper, they put you in a group with like 10 other people. Most of them aren't your age, you're all doing the same exercises. And then you don't buy in because the physical therapist isn't listening, and then you don't actually do the therapy, and then you just chalk it up as this is something you're going to be stuck with for the rest of your life. It doesn't have to be that way, I promise. Jason, I'm going to use you as the example because I know you've been dealing with a back injury or issue for a while. I remember you coming into the group with it, and you just brought it up tonight. So what's going on with your back? Like, take me kind of, and I'll just kind of show you like a thought process on how we can approach injury and maybe shed some light on it.
So basically, I've got about 15 years of being sitting on my ass always at a desk job. I haven't been the gym guy, any of that. Started implementing it. But pretty much, I tend to injure my back when I bend over to grab something. And yesterday I injured it again, picking up an office chair, something stupid. It's a psoas muscle, it seems to be. But it seems to happen every 2 to 3 months or so. So, like you said, I tend not to bend over to pick things up because I don't want to injure it again.
Okay. So when I'm looking, so if you were to come in and I'm going to watch you move, right? So what I want to see is like your joints, ranges of motion. So I want us to kind of take a step back from looking at things as from a muscular standpoint, because once we've had an injury, like a lot of people say, we got to get to the root cause, but the root cause multiplied over, a couple years is no longer, it's a whole body issue. It's not just a single thing that caused the initial injury. Right. So I keep going back to my ankle. I had a terrible ankle injury when I was 18, and it's affected me my whole life. So the ankle is going to affect the way, the knee moves, the hip moves, the low back moves, the pelvis moves, and it affects the body as a whole. Right. So now I have issues kind of stemming up everywhere. And we have to follow that. So the first thing we want to look at is like, do you have access to the ranges of motion that you're asking your body to be in? If not, that's where we start, right? So like with the human movement stuff, when I ask people to move their joints, if they have pain halfway down, we start moving to where you don't have pain. So if that's only like 10% of the joint's range of motion, that's what we're going to double and triple down on, right? Because if you keep moving through pain, your body's going to continue to associate that movement as painful and as dangerous, and then you're just not going to do it. It's the same for any injury. You'll just avoid it because your body's like, yo, we got injured last time and this keeps happening. So it would behoove you just not to do that anymore. Right. So we have to take a step back and let's slowly start to build a better relationship with the brain and the low back. So the low back is it gets kind of like chalked up. People think of low back, it's like a single structure, but it's 5 vertebrae. It connects the spine to the pelvis. There's I don't know how many muscles attached to the low back. I mean, it's incredible how many muscles attached to the low back and that are involved with moving the spinal column of the low back and of the pelvis, right? It's like when people blame the glute or the the piriformis for their hip issues, there's 17 muscles that attach to the hip. How can we chalk it up to there's just one muscle, right? So let's look at what the joints do, right? So does your low back have access to the ranges of motions that you're asking it to be in? If not, then that's where we need to go. That now we work backwards, right? So look at it as like training. I want to be strong as shit so I can bend over and pick anything up, right? So you start with the ranges of motion you have. So it doesn't matter shoulder, neck, hips, ankles, knees. We start with what we have and we strengthen what we have, right? But what do we usually the protocol is like, oh, do 3 sets of 10 reps, a couple of times a week. Your body's not going to buy into that shit because you do 3 by 10, it's boring, and then you're just, I'm not going to do it anymore. I feel a little better. And then until the next time, until you bend over and pick something up, your back's like, yo, what are you doing? I thought we didn't do this anymore. We were going to send pain signals to put you out to teach you a lesson almost. Right. So part of the injury and rehab process is teaching the brain and the body to get onto the same page. It's building a better relationship between the brain and the body. Right now, there's a disconnect. Brain doesn't trust the body, and the body is just doing what the brain tells it to do. So when we look at it from a training standpoint, we look at the low back, the 5 vertebrae of the low back. Do you have access to the ranges of motion? If not, that's where we start. And we start to strengthen that. And then we start to load that. And then we continue to load it so it's strong so that when you go to pick up like an office chair, your body doesn't think twice about it. Right. But then you also got to look at the structures above and below, the pelvis, the hip, and then the thoracic spine, like the mid back, your T-spine. Right. So we got to strengthen everything around it too, because nothing in the body works as an individual. The low back doesn't just not work by itself. We have to look at everything. So like when you take a step, your spine rotates, it bends to the side, the hips actually move up and down and they kind of rotate all with one step. There's a lot of joint movements going on when we're moving. To accomplish any movement task, there's a lot of joint actions that have to happen within seconds. And if the body doesn't feel safe where you're asking it to go, it's going to send pain signals. Doesn't mean that there's always injury. Doesn't always mean that there's damage. It's just, it can be like an overprotective mother. We have to be in a better relationship with our mom sometimes, which is the pain cycle. And then once it gets into chronic pain, it actually will remap the brain. And there's studies that show so the brain is what we call, it has plasticity. So they used to think that when the brain, you hit a certain age, that the brain was done developing. But studies have shown that the brain can actually rewire itself. You just have to put reps in to rewire itself and provide better routes. So the nervous system is like cable lines. Nerves are they send electrical impulses and they're communicating with each other. And if we start to associate, you can start to see emotions get associated with pain. So your low back, right? You can start to, we see this with people in chronic pain is everything starts to get wrapped around. We talk about identity with that low back pain. And I'm not saying that's you. I'm just saying with the clients that come in with chronic pain and ones that I've worked with low back pain is their identity becomes wrapped in that low back pain. Right. So as you can see, injury isn't as simple as yes, it is, tissue gets damaged, but there's also the mental component many of us overlook, and then the training component that many of us overlook. So getting back to the movement thing, this is why I'm a huge advocate of you don't need to be in a weight room all the time, but you need to move your body daily. You need to move your joints daily because the brain and the nervous system are constantly rewiring itself. Because the nervous system takes a lot of energy to maintain, a lot of energy, like a ton of calories to maintain our neural pathways. That's why you have to practice things to stay good at it, right? If you think like an elite level athlete, like a golfer, they golf every day to maintain those neural circuits. Because if they don't, those neural circuits will actually start to unwind themselves because it's kind of like a move it or lose it situation. So if you go from doing nothing to trying to deadlift 300 pounds, your body's like, yo, we don't know what we're doing. We don't do this. So that's why the 3 by 10 type of reps is kind of silly. You actually got to do like hundreds of reps each day to build the communication pathways between the brain and the body, right? So you have to think of it as a skill. So if we haven't moved our joints for like 5 years, that's 5 years of not moving. That's 5 years of like neural pathways not being like nice and grooved, right? They're kind of dusty. You think of like brush covering the road. If you don't travel a road or a trail and they don't upkeep the trail, you lose the trail. So by moving our joints daily, we upkeep the trail. We keep the trail clean so that we have a clear direction so the brain can communicate to the body. So this is why 3 by 10 doesn't work. This is why we have to start looking at hundreds and hundreds of reps. And we have to look at it of being intentful of, how much do we want to get out of pain? How much do we want to build it? It's like a skill, right? Movement's a skill. And if we haven't done anything for 5 years, we lose that skill. We lose the neural grooves to keep that skill there because your body's convinced we don't do this anymore until you knock the rust off and you slowly start doing things. And I think Sam, you're going on with your shoulder. How's your shoulder doing? Kind of take us through like what you've been doing to work on your shoulder stuff and what's been working for you.
Yeah. So, shoulder, I mean, I've been dealing with the shoulder thing for years now. But most recently, I think the biggest thing was, I guess, two things. One is just patience. And that was kind of a lesson that I've been faced with time and again, of just not trying to rush the process. Cause I think in my head, I really want my body to do this. And this being maybe 5 steps down from where I am today in terms of mobility or range of motion or whatever it may be. So I think just making sure I'm being patient with the process. And the other thing is really just adjusting my mindset, listening to my body, and not, I think I watched like a ton of videos or YouTube videos and of like bodybuilders, and I follow bodybuilders on Instagram and stuff like that. And I think in my head, I start to want to, be just like that guy or that person or have that physique. And because of that, I watch the way they train, and I try to, in my head, I almost just think, I want my body to do exactly what I see in this video. And I think for me, it was shifting that mindset and just actually listening to what my body is telling me it needs versus what I want my body to do, if that makes sense. And that was just a big mindset shift, because for years I'm just like, I would tell my body, hey, I want it to do this. I want me to be able to lift this much weight or do it in this way because that's what this guy in this video did, or this guy I'm following did. But it was really just changing it to listening, where's that pain coming from, and how can I adjust what I'm doing based on what my body is telling me, if that makes sense. I feel like I rambled a little bit there, but
No,
it was really just a mindset.
Yeah, and that's listening to your body. Like the body is an intuitive system. Like again, pain is just your body's way of telling you what it's experiencing. It's trying to talk to you. It's communication. It's trying to tell you something's up, something's wrong, something's off. Right? I think when we sit for a while and we go to stand up and we're like, oh, that feels good, right? Like people are like, oh, it feels good to move. Like it's your low back starts to hurt from sitting too much, is like kind of your body's way of telling you like, hey, we got to get up and move. And so Jason, I'm just gonna use this example, like with low back, like doing stuff standing hurts, we can then go to quadruped or all fours. We can go to tall kneeling or half kneeling, right? We can take gravity not out of the equation, but we can change the way gravity is being forced. So if we're standing up, gravity is pushing straight down on my spine. But if I go on all fours, it's hitting gravity is affecting the spine at a different angle. So those spinal movements can actually be done on the floor, very slow and very controlled reps, right? Intuitive in being slow, right? If we do things mindlessly, it doesn't allow our body to actually, do the skill. So I don't know if there's any musicians in here, but as a guitar player, when I first started playing guitar, like it's very clunky. It's very like robotic. There's no rhythm to it. But you have to start slow so you can start to ingrain the patterns in. So same thing with movement. If standing's not great, we move to the ground, right? So if we have low back issues, we move the thoracic spine or like the rib cage area, side to side, flexion, extension, rotation. But then we can also move the pelvis. We can move it up and down. We can tuck and tilt. We can rotate it, right? Because those are all, the low back kind of connects the top to the bottom. It connects the thoracic spine to the pelvis. So we move the structure, the low back itself, we move the upper back or thoracic spine, and then we move this pelvis, right? So, and then you have to just, your age for reps, but if it's injured, we have to like triple the reps by the end of the day, right? And then that becomes like, what's the intention behind it, right? Like how, the question, how, not just for you, but all my clients is like, how bad do you want to get out of pain? What is that? How much does that mean to you? What's your pain preventing you from doing? Right? Because a lot of times at least what I always did, especially in powerlifting, I ignored the pain. We're going to train through the pain. Don't be soft. Like train through the pain. But if you learn to listen to it, like Sam was saying, like it's an intuitive system. If you learn to listen to it, you're actually going to make more progress in the long run. And it's got to looking at the big picture, not the short term. Because a lot of people that come in to work with me, they want results immediately because that's what we've been sold as a society. But that's not how things work with the body. The body does things on its own timeline. We can't fucking speed things up. And it's just, I'm learning this with the kids in like education. Some kids can't read right away. They don't want to read right away. Their brain and body's not ready for it right away. Some don't start reading until they're like 10 or 12, but people think that there's something wrong with them. 7-year-olds, if they don't want to read, they don't need to read. It's the same thing with anything else that we're doing. I don't know where I was going with that. I think I do. We can't force the body to do something it's not prepared to do, but we can train it and get it ready to. It takes time, it takes effort, it takes skill. And if it's something like, if my clients don't want to get out of pain, like I can't help you because I can't fix or help people. We're the only ones who can heal you is yourself. A coach can help get you there. We can guide you. We can offer you the resources. We can tell you what to do. But at the end of the day, you have to get it right up here, right? This is where like rehab starts, is in the head, because a lot of people go to rehab and they mindlessly go through the reps. One, because rehab's usually boring, because they don't teach PTs how to make rehab fun and exciting. Again, not knocking PTs. So that's, Peliaki, you said you had, back, knee, and shoulder issues too. We have to work backwards, right? Do you have access to the ranges of motion that you're asking your body to be in? If not, we have to start there. How can we get access to those ranges? Do we have access? Do you have a structural issue? Do you have any type of soft tissue injuries that are preventing you from getting there? Or is it just like wear and tear from over the years? And wear and tear is normal, but what happens is when we have pain is we stop moving the joints the way they're supposed to. And then the brain thinks that's what we don't do anymore. We have to keep it moving. Now, yes, when you get injured, you have to let it rest. You have to let it recover, right? But usually when you get to PT quicker after an injury, we see it, the recovery is quicker. The quicker you start to address the movement issues, the quicker the rehab process will typically take. Herniated disc in my lower back, ruptured ACL, torn meniscus years ago, ACL. Yeah. So there's some other things we can look into for that besides just movement, especially if there's scar tissue build up in where the knee is, and some like red light therapy and shockwave therapy. And there's some different types of supplements you can take that will actually, how do I say this? They'll actually like digest the scar tissue. So things like vitamin C, vitamin K, 2,7, serrapeptase and nattokinase will actually help dissolve scar tissue. But you got to commit to that for like 6 months on top of the movement. Herniated discs are tricky because a lot of people think they're like a death sentence, but again, it's the same thing. When we herniate a disc, we get seeds implanted in our head that our back's fucked up, and we'll always go back to like that. Oh, it's my herniated disc. It's my herniated disc. And I'm not saying that this is you. But it's, again, we have to build that trust. We have to put it's like training for powerlifting meet. Like the only way you're going to know if you've gotten stronger is to test your strength. So we have to put your body through a legit training program, but it's more movement based. Right. So this is where I think people kind of get lost, is like, is approaching the rehab like they do any kind of other training, approaching injury like they do any other kind of training. Nothing changes. If my glutes are weak or my hips are weak, I got to strengthen them. If an area is injured, I got to strengthen it. And if I can't move it through its range of motions, then that's where we have to start. And then we start to build confidence with it. You do hundreds of reps, just stacking reps every day. And then you slowly start to load it. You slowly start to put it into positions that it was not safe before. And I think I said this to Sam when we were talking about shoulder a couple of weeks. Like, sometimes injuries are a gift. It allows you to step back and reevaluate what you're doing, because what you're doing isn't working. It doesn't mean like there's nothing out there that won't work. You just have to reevaluate things. So like with a lot of my barbell athletes, we got to take a break from the barbell, because what you're doing is not working. It's just making things worse. Because what you see with barbell athletes is they start to have compensation issues. So their body will find a way to avoid the pain. It'll find a way to move away from the issue. Now you just move the issue to another part of the body. That's what I mean. We talk about like a root cause. It just is this pinball effect. So we see it as an opportunity to learn new training modalities, to stress the body in ways that maybe it hasn't been stressed before. Yeah. And sometimes an injury is just an injury. Like an ACL tear, you can do all the movement you want in the world. It's not going to fucking miraculously put the ACL back together. Although there is some studies on spontaneous ACL healing, which is pretty wild. I'm telling you, the body's a wild thing, man. We try to make it this thing. It's crazy. But if we put the body in a position to win and in a position to heal itself, it will. But we have to work with the body, not against it. We have to listen to it and what it's telling us. And sometimes we do have to step in the way, like, yo, it's kind of like telling the ego to take a seat. I got this. Like, let's just see where we're at. So like if you've had pain in your back for so long, like sometimes you do have to test it, because that's going to build strength between your relationship between your brain and body. So by moving our joints daily, it helps us build a foundation of movement, right? Because like I was saying earlier, we need our joints to have access to the ranges of motion to accomplish the tasks that we're asking it to do, even if it's something as simple as hiking. Because like Jason, what's cool with the body, but not cool for like people in pain, is that, the vertebrae of the spine are all individual joints, all of them. They're all meant to move on their own. But if they don't move on their own, they can actually start to get stuck together. And what was like one joint moving as individuals, 2 or 3 become one joint. So let's say the thoracic spine, like T1 through T3. So those vertebrae, what were 3 separate, can actually kind of get fused as 3, and the brain will actually rewire itself to move those 3 vertebrae as one. So I'm not saying that's what's going on with your low back, but it's something that, we can look into. Your low back may just be moving as a rigid structure, as a protective mechanism. And then when you actually go to like bend it into 5 individual vertebrae, the brain's like, yo, you just took my one joint and made it 5. What are you doing? We're going to send pain signals. Don't do this anymore. We don't do this. Right? It's because now those 5 individual joints don't have the ability to move through their full range of motions as individual joints. So that's why we want to make sure each joint is able to do what it's meant to do, right? And by doing that, we unlock our body's ability to move. It's easier to learn new skills, our capability to express movement. And what I mean by expressing movement is rock climbing, gymnastics, weight training, biking, hiking. Those are all movement expressions. So by moving the joints daily and ensuring we have access to those ranges of motion, it's easier for us to learn new skills, and it increases our capability to express those skills. I know this was a talk on injury, but like you can see how movement injury, why injury happens. We start to ask these better questions, and if I don't have access to ranges of motion, the first question in my head is why? Why don't we have access? How can we get access? And that's kind of our starting points, right? Do we have the simple, Sam with his shoulder? So the shoulder is actually the shoulder blade and then the upper arm, and the shoulder blade's connected to the rib cage. So all of those play part into movement of the shoulder. Does his rib cage move well? Does his shoulder blade move well along the rib cage? Does the upper arm move well in conjunction with the shoulder blade? Right. So those are all different movements that we have to have access to those ranges in order for the shoulder to move in a safe manner to express movement. And if we don't, then we start to see, oh, my pecs are tight, my elbows hurt, my neck hurts, my upper back's tight, right? That's all your body telling you, like, yo, something's going on in this whole region here. Not a lot of times, but let's say majority of the times, is sometimes usually the site of pain isn't really where the issue is. So like Sam's issue might not be the shoulder. It's a byproduct of something else going on. It could be a shoulder blade. It could be a rib cage. Does he have good breath mechanics? Could be, if his thoracic spine doesn't have good movement and doesn't have good air movement, it kind of inside out affects the movement from the spine out to the arm, because the spine is what drives movement. Right? That's why I'm big on moving our spines daily. Right? So if we think inside out, the spine can't move well. So low back, then you look at the pelvis, then you look at the hip, then you look at the knee, and then you look at the ankle. Right? It's a trickle down effect. So anybody that's having issues, I would say one, so if you have a shoulder issue, explore and be curious about things of what is the shoulder, how is the shoulder supposed to move, and then start to explore the movements of those ranges of motion for the spine. So, Jay, with the low back, how is the low back supposed to move? How is the pelvis supposed to move? How is the thoracic spine and rib cage supposed to move? Because again, nothing in the body moves in isolation. Educate yourself on how the joints are supposed to move, and then try to play around with that movement, right? Just try to move around. Try and just move the low back. Try to just move the pelvis, and try, if you really try to be intentful, right? There's a difference between me going like this or being mindful of moving my hands, or this. Think about like that's setting those grooves. So Sam, with your shoulder, like you start everything slow, right? We can't just mash the gas right away, because the brain's like, yeah, we're not doing this. I'm not ready for this. Like nice and easy, nice and slow. So yeah, explore the movement, learn what the joint's supposed to do, look at the ranges of motion, and start by doubling down on moving them every day. So like suggestions, I always say your age for reps daily. And people are like, holy shit, I don't have time for that. It's like most people sit on average like 8 hours a day, 9 hours a day. And then if they sleep 8 hours a day, that's like 16 hours of not moving. We drive our cars to work. We sit all day at work. We drive our cars back from home. People be like, well, I took a cycle class. You're still sitting, right? And they'll sit at home for dinner, and they'll sit down and watch TV. We have time. We just have to, it's there. It's looking, so like cooking dinner, right? Perfect time to move. Today I had my son on my lap. I'm moving my ankles. I'm moving my toes. I'm moving my knee. using my left arm, I'm moving my right arm, right? The opportunities are there, but most of us will be on our phones. It was just trying to change the perspective on we are a movement-based species, but we're now become sedentary. We have opportunities, so looking for those opportunities throughout the day. So what I like to do with my clients is we do 3 days of reps, their age, 4 reps, all joints. And then the other 3 days we do isometrics. So what that means is that we go to the end range of motion. So my neck, for example, lateral flexion, I'll go as far as I can and I'll hold for 30 seconds, right? Because now I'm telling my brain I'm safe here. Same with the low back, flexion, extension, lateral flexion, rotation. Same with the shoulder. Shoulder's got a ton of different movements. So if like internal, external rotation, if I'm tight, I'll hold that all the way there and just hold it. Same with moving my shoulder blade. It's just exploring movement and just getting it back into our heads that we're movement-based species. I mean, that essentially movement is what allowed us to survive. I mean, if you look at the evolution of human movement, we started as fish, come out onto the sea as reptiles, we grow appendages, and then now if you look at how a baby crawls, it's very similar to how like a lizard or a salamander moves with this like spinal engine. But we lose it, right? What do we do with kids? We tell them to sit in class all day, go home, do your homework, and sit, right? They start young telling people to sit. Now we have all kinds of, if you read the research and the studies, like the lack of movement causes a lot of mental health issues. Because we all know movement's good for the brain. Go outside, be in nature, ground your feet on the ground. When you get done being outside, you feel good. You feel good when you move your body. As much as I hated the 10K, I felt good because I was out. It was a beautiful day. The trails were there. Moved my body. I just felt good, right? So go outside. Start your day with moving your body. Start your day with moving your shoulder joints, your low backs, your knees, your ankles. Even if you only have 5 minutes, 5 minutes is better than nothing. So if you took like 10 5-minute breaks throughout the day, so if you sit all day, you set a timer for every hour to get up and move for 5 minutes. That's 50 minutes of movement at the end of the day. You multiply that times 7 days, times 52 weeks, that's a lot of movement you may have not gotten, right? So it's just finding these little tricks to convince yourself to get into those things. Questions, comments, was this helpful?
Just to double down on something you just said or have been saying, I think one of the keys for me, and I guess is the key for me in my shoulder recovery, is changing what I'm doing. And I think it took me a really, really long time to understand that what I was doing wasn't working and the path forward wasn't continuing to try that same thing. And from the first time I actually injured my shoulder to the many times it's kind of flared up or I've in my head re-injured it, it was me just waiting for it to heal and then going back to doing the exact same routine, exercises, everything identical to what I was doing prior, hoping that, okay, I'm healed now, let's just jump back into what I was doing. And then that same pattern led to me re-injuring myself or my shoulder, and it was just doing that over and over again. And then it wasn't until more recently where I kind of had to look at myself in the mirror and just come to terms with what I'm doing isn't working. And that's okay. It just means I need to be comfortable with adjusting what I do at the gym, what my routine is, what reps I do, everything. And I made some big adjustments to that routine, to what I do at the gym. And it's really changed both my mindset, but just how my shoulder feels. So it took a really long time for that to click in my brain of, it's okay to do something different. This might work for someone else, but it's not working for you. And so I need to change it.
Yeah. And there's a huge life lesson there, right? That's everything in life. when shit's not working, we got to change course, right? We can't just sit around and do nothing, right? That's why it's like they tell, like, you go to the doctor, they'll tell you to rest for 6 weeks and don't do nothing, and then you can return to it. But we didn't give the body a reason to change or get stronger. It's the same in business. When something's not working, I can't continue to do the same thing, or otherwise I'm not going to have a business. So if you start to see how like these are all these lessons for life, right? Like just tied into this, right? We can't sit. We got to make moves. We got to get up and move. If we sit, that gives death. Death's going to catch up quicker, right? Like there's so many different lessons we can learn just from movement that a lot of my clients, like, they don't realize it until like we tell them, like, hey, see how this is relating to your life, right? Because when you start moving your body, you start making other moves in other places in your life, right? So we think about like weight loss. We get people to move their bodies more, take the walk, move their bodies, right? What happens when you start to move your bodies more? We start to sleep better, right? Then you're probably going to start going to the gym. And then you're probably going to start associating with other people who do those things, because the people who don't, well, they're not, you don't want them around anymore because they're not moving you towards where you want to go, right? So then you start to surround yourself with better people. You join 1612, right? Then you see all of us doing rad shit. And now you're doing rad shit with, it's just from taking the walk. It's just from moving can have like this huge effect in our life. Like one of my sayings is like, movement creates momentum. Doing shit creates momentum, right? Sitting around pissing and moaning, wondering why I'm not getting better doesn't create that change. It's the same with injury. It's like you can't sit and just mope about like why we have an injury. We have to do something about it, or otherwise you don't care about it and you need to let it go, right? If your pain isn't that big of a deal for you, like, just drop it. If you don't want to get better, just drop it, right? It becomes that identity. And those are hard conversations that sometimes I'll have to have with clients, like, and that's just because I care. It's not because I'm trying to be a dick. Sometimes it comes off as being a dick, but it's because I genuinely care. So we have to have these hard conversations with people. Like, if you don't want to get better, then cool, admit that to yourself. Like, don't waste your time, like time, mental energy, if you don't want to put the work in. Like, that's fine. Let's move on to something that we can do to move you forward towards things that you want to do. Don't waste time on things you don't want to do or things that don't speak to you, right? So there's this huge life lesson in injury. Injury is a gift. Pain is a gift, right? Anger is a gift. All these things are gifts if we sit down and listen to the body. This intuitive system is trying to, what is it trying to tell me, right? You know, and sometimes injuries just, they haunt you for the rest of your life. Like my ankle, I literally have to move it hundreds of times a day, and I'm still in pain from the race. I have a 12-mile hike on Saturday. I'm still moving it every day. I don't know. There's probably damage in there, but it is what it is. Sometimes injury and pain is part of what we do, but you shouldn't have to live in constant fear of movement. Like, I will run this thing into the ground until it breaks, and then we'll get surgery and we'll fix it. But don't be in fear. Like, start to build better relationship with your body, start to build trust with your body. If you have pain, explore that pain, listen to that pain. What's my body trying to tell me? And again, if you're moving and you have pain through a certain range, so if I go to close my hand and I have pain there, I would just move like that. I would just do my reps there. Because remember, if you move into pain, your body's going to associate that movement as painful and that we shouldn't do it. It reminds the body that there's pain when we move there. So when you have injured tissues, just move through the ranges where you don't have pain. Hundreds of reps. And then the next day, increase that range a little bit more, because you're going to start to build trust. You're going to start to feel good. That's how I approach injury. That's literally our clinic business model. It's the chiropractor I'm working with. That's our approach to rehab and injury. Is the first question was we ask in the assessment, do the joints have access to their range of motion? If not, that's where we start. We get creative with how we train it, though. It's not always, I'm cool with doing boring shit, so just moving my joints all these times, but we do get creative with how we do that. But that's the cool thing with the body, is that it has an infinite capacity for movement, right? Again, we go to the gym movement versus human movement. The gym is reduced movement down to squat, hinge, push, pull, carry, and like lunge or something, right? But if you watch the NFL, I know a lot of people hated on the NFL this past Sunday's call, but if you watch NFL players move, it's like beautiful. It's beauty in motion to see what their bodies are capable of doing in like split seconds. So just remember your capacity, your capacity and your capability for movement is infinite. The ways in which your body can move is infinite. So explore movement. Find what moves you and move. And if you're in pain, listen to it and start to develop a better relationship with that pain and get on the same page with it, because the pain is there to help you. It's not there to piss you off. It's not there to like make your life miserable. It's there to protect you. So what's it protecting you from? So if it's like chronic pain or chronic injury, it's trying to protect you from doing the same thing over and over. It's just not strong in the positions you're asking it to be in. That's all I got. Anybody else have anything?
I just thank you, man. I appreciate all the help you've given me towards my back, and I'm hoping to get better here. Like I basically am living in that fear of re-injuring it, like you're talking about. So last time I injured it was just bending down to stretch to touch my toes, and I couldn't stand up straight for 4 days.
Yeah. So Jason, go ahead and shoot me. I'll shoot you a message on Discord or text me, and I'll give you some things, some movements to do to kind of like just give you some better starting points than what you know. Because what happens is that a lot of people in pain, they kind of like, I don't know what to do anymore. I'm just honestly, people are afraid to do anything because they don't want to get hurt. They're tired of being in pain, so they literally won't do anything. Which is why this is what I do, right? So we'll give you some movements, and the only thing we got to do, man, is you have to be intentful with the movements. You have to be slow and under control with those movements, and just think of, we're just building a better relationship. We're just laying down some grooves. And anybody with any injuries, like, just shoot me a message. Like, you're in the Discord, you're paying for this. This is an investment. Like, this is why Matt brought me on, is to provide these things for you. So if you guys are having issues, you know, just shoot me a message. I'm having some shoulder issues. Great. Like I had with Heather, she was having some issues with her shoulders. I looked at her breathing, did some breath work, did some shoulder movement. Pain kind of subsided, right? So it could be as simple as that. I'm not saying everybody is, but just shoot me a message. Let me help. That's what I'm here to do. Let me help. I love helping. I care about all of you. And I don't want to see you in pain. I want to see you out there fucking crushing shit. So just shoot that message. Jason, I'll shoot you a message here as soon as we get off the call.
Awesome.
If anybody else doesn't have anything, house cleaning. What do I see? We had the Train Heroic teams. So there's 3 teams. There's training, which is just a hybrid of strength and conditioning. There's movement and recovery. And then there's the complete, which combines movement, recovery, and training. 15 to $30. First 7 days are free. And what else? Halloween party is in 2 weeks, the 30th, I think. And what else we got? Josh, we got anything else going on in 1612?
No, I think that's it. 29th is Halloween party. Yeah, no, I think that's it.
Yeah. And just keep crushing shit. Again, leverage the group. Leverage the people in the group. You're investing in it. You have access to all of these rad fucking human beings, man. Leverage that shit. Use the Discord. Talk to people outside the Discord. You get what you put in. So everyone will help you design your universe and your life. You got to move towards it. All right, y'all. Appreciate you. We'll talk soon.